Hi guys, Wednesday video. I've changed the angle slightly of the video camera or the computer. One of the girls who's sort of into the more superficial things in life, like looks, had suggested I change the camera angle. So that's what I've done. I hope you like it. Anyway, this video is very quickly going to be about energy systems and how that should be considered in your training. I'd had written down the things I'd wanted to go over, but then I realised that this is bloody useless because it's just a reflection, so you can't actually see what that says. So that was a waste of time. Anyway, so yeah, one of the new persons had asked in an email the other day that they were worried that if they weren't lifting as much weight as the person next to them, does that mean that they're not working as hard? In a nutshell, no, it doesn't mean that at all. Okay, it doesn't mean that at all, because your body doesn't know what weight you're lifting, and the weight on the bar isn't what determines the intensity of the session at all. It's the number of reps you've been prescribed. That's what determines the intensity of the session. That's why we tell you to do a certain number of reps, not lift that weight, because it doesn't matter about the weight. It's all about the reps, and that's why that's the beauty of weight training. That's why it's so effective for everyone, because it's all relative to the individual. So if you've got someone that's lifting let's suppose you've got someone that can lift 200 kilos for one rep. That's their absolute maximum effort. They can heave 200 kilos off the floor, right? And you've got someone next to them who can lift 100 kilos off the floor, absolute maximum effort. So the person that can lift 200 kilos is twice as strong, okay? But if we ask them to lift a weight for 10 reps that's a challenge to them, relative to them, okay, it has to be it's a percentage of their relative strength. So in other words, let's then suppose that 100 kilo lifter lifted 70 kilos for 10 reps, okay, that's 70% of what they managed for one. And let's suppose the person next to them who managed 200 kilos for one lifts 120 for 10. So the person lifting 120 kilos is lifting 20 kilos more. However, relative to their own strength, they're not working as hard, okay, because they can lift 200 kilos. So they should, technically, if they wanted to work as hard as the person next to them lifting 70, they should probably be lifting about 140 as a percentage of their one rep maximum lift. And so that is the beauty of it. It's not about the weight, it's about you and how much you're lifting relative to your own strength, okay? So that's the thing that doesn't impress us, like how much the person's lifting. What impresses is the effort they're putting in, how much they're getting into it. And when we see someone that's grinding out a set of 10 reps at 30 kilos and that's a real challenge to them, that is what we want to see. That's respect, because that's the hard thing. We know what it's like to grind out 10 reps regardless of the weight. It doesn't matter about the weight. Anyway, so that's a short answer, okay? The next thing I wanted to discuss very quickly is energy systems, okay? Because I think it's still it's probably a concept that I've never really touched upon, and it's not really ever discussed. And it's important though, because it's something that's in the fitness industry isn't really discussed too much, and it's this whole constant obsession with calories. About it doesn't matter the intensity of a session, as long as the calories are matched, then the outcomes are the same, which is absolute nonsense, okay? Fundamentally, what I'd written on here was just the brief sort of explanations of the different energy systems. Fundamentally, right, everything you do requires energy, okay? Energy, and any sort of muscle contraction, from doing this to walking to scratching your face, that requires muscle contraction, so it requires energy. And the energy that it requires is something called ATP, okay? But ATP is a very short-lived energy source, and it breaks down, okay, it's a chemical reaction, really, if I'm going to be a bit more specific, and it breaks down into something called ADP, okay, but in order for the muscle contractions to just continually happen over and over and over again, chemical reactions have to occur to continually replace the broken down ATP to keep replenishing it, okay? So essentially, there's no point going into all the details of that, but basically energy is required, okay, and energy, there's three different energy systems that are used to create movement, basically, and they are the creatine phosphate ADP system, or ATP system. So creatine phosphate system, the lactic acid system, and the oxygen system, the O2 system, the aerobic system, okay? So the creatine phosphate system and the lactic acid system are primarily without oxygen, okay? So they use less oxygen, and the oxygen system, the aerobic system, obviously does use oxygen, okay? Now the difference between the energy systems is how quickly they are depleted. The creatine phosphate system has got a sort of like span of about 10 seconds. And the reason it's got a span of about 10 seconds is because it is responsible for the most powerful contractions, the most short, sharp bursts, such as a 1 rep max, an Olympic lift, a 100-meter sprint. Okay, so in order to maximally sprint for 10 seconds, it is the creatine phosphate system that is creating the energy to do that. But because of the huge amount of energy that is required to do that, it depletes extremely quickly, i.e. 10 seconds. Okay, so in order to then do any more work past the 10-second mark, your body starts to delve into something called the lactic acid system. Okay, and what that does is, as a byproduct, is that it produces lactate, which is that sort of burning sensation that you feel when you're exercising or when you're like running like 200 and 300 meters and stuff like that. And the lactic acid system also is quite high intensity system, but again, it only has a sort of shelf life, or if you want to call it that, of about 2 minutes maximum. So you can only perform to a high level with the lactic acid system for about 2 minutes before the intensity then drops into the aerobic system. And essentially anything above 2 minutes, anything that requires you to do for more than 2 minutes, is moving more and more into the aerobic system. Okay, which is the oxygen system, which is just when you're breathing heavily, your heart and lungs. So it's kind of a really confusing concept, this, so I don't know if I'm going to be able to explain it that well myself. I'll try my best here, right? But basically, most folk will spend the majority of their time in the oxygen system. Okay, pretty much every activity you do will be you just walking, just generally doing anything. You're just breathing, so it's just oxygen. You're just using oxygen. You're not tapping into your creatine phosphate system at all, mainly because the only time you do that is when you're doing something of a maximal effort, like a sprint, okay, or lifting a really heavy weight. So if you can imagine the creatine phosphate system, it's responsible for such an enormous amount of power production. It's almost like an atomic bomb going off, right? So it only lasts a split second, like it's an instantaneous bomb or explosion of energy which disappears within 10 seconds. But the ripple effects, the consequences of it are enormous. Okay, it ripples out. It can be and it only lasts 10 seconds, and if you want to work it again, if you want to repeat that maximal burst of power that came from the creatine phosphate system, then you need to allow time for it to recover. Okay, and it takes about 5 minutes for it to fully recover, 3 to 5 minutes usually, for it to fully recover before you're ready to then repeat and do another maximal intensity sprint to the same level or maximal lift. Okay, so this is where it gets confusing. Because what I'm trying to say is that the more intense something is, okay, the shorter duration it is, and the longer recovery you need before you have to repeat it. Okay, now that's paradoxical in some ways, because it kind of goes against what we understand, or what we think we understand about exercise. Because commonly we think, well, I need to beast it, and I need to feel that I'm mega sweating, and that my heart and lungs are pounding, and my heart's beating mega for a long period of time, and that is what we associate with intensity. But the irony is that is actually not intense. If you're doing something for 30 to 60 minutes, it's not intense. It can't be intense because you're doing it for 30 or 60 minutes. So in other words, the duration of something, much like the number of repetitions when you're weightlifting, will dictate how intense it is. So if we're asking you to do 5 sets of 10 reps, for example, the fact that you're asked to do 5 sets of 10 reps means that it can't physiologically be as intense as if we asked you to just do 1 rep, because you adjust the weight according to the number of reps. I hope that, I don't know if that makes sense. So I'm trying to think of examples. So if we asked you to run 100 meters, right, and we gave you 2 minutes recovery in between each of those 100 meters, that would be a really challenging session, right? Lactic acid would be burning, so you'd be in the lactic acid system, and the longer you went into these reps, you would start to become more aerobic, because the recovery is only 2 minutes, so your creatine phosphate system's not getting enough chance to replenish, so that can't be used. Your lactic acid system's starting to not get the chance to recover, so that can't be used, so it becomes more aerobic. So by its very nature, if it becomes more aerobic, that means you're going to start to get slower in order to allow you to continue to finish the set number of reps. If, on the other hand, we say, right, we're going to do 600 metres instead of 10, and on top of that, we're going to give you 6 minutes rest in between each of those sprints, that is a much more intense workout than the 10 hundreds with 2 minutes rest. And I know that sounds confusing because you're thinking, well, why is it? I'm running less and I'm taking longer rest. But that's why it's more intense, because the recovery allows you to then sprint faster. Okay, and that's maybe something that's missed, understandably missed, because it's quite confusing. I understand it completely in my head, but I'm maybe struggling a wee bit to convey it and or vocalise it. So that is where sprints is completely unique in itself, okay, from anything else, because so I'll give you an example. Yesterday I did 10 times 30 metre sprints, okay, or 12 times 30 metre sprints. So 30 metres, it literally took 4 seconds. So I sprinted for 4 seconds, okay, because I was trying to work on my acceleration, right? Then in between each of those 4 second sprints, I took 2 minutes rest, okay, and that allowed me to work at a maximal sprint speed every time I did that session, the reps. Today I did a recovery from that session, so I did a recovery session today. Right? I've just finished it, and the session was 17-second runs. Okay, fast running, 17 seconds with 1 minute rest times 10. So think of the how much more running I did today. I did a lot more running, and I took a lot less rest because I was recovering from yesterday. So today was easier on my body. Aerobically it was much harder. I was out of breath a lot more, but it was a less intense session. And the reason it was less intense was because I only took a minute rest and I was running for longer. And that is a confusing concept, to understand that. But it's to do with energy systems. And the longer the duration of something, the more you're working the oxygen system. And the less duration and the more recovery you give yourself, the more you're working the creatine phosphate system. And the reason that's important is because the creatine phosphate system allows you to maximally recruit as much muscle fibre as possible, and really create an explosion, right, like a supercar. Whereas the opposite end of the spectrum is like long distance running, which doesn't do that. This becomes even more crucial. This is why sprinting is unique, because not only when it comes to weights, right, the difference, the intensity will be determined by the recovery and the weight you put in the bar, so i.e. the number of reps you're set, whether it's 5 or 8 or 12. But the range of movement is always going to be the same. A deadlift's a deadlift. You pick it from the floor, you lift it up. Sprinting, on the other hand, requires not only you to increase speed and increase recovery, it also asks for a bigger range of movement. So it's even more unique than weightlifting in that respect, because you can't sprint without a different technique than other types of running. That's why sprinting is unique. I'm quite happy to put that out there and say that they're not the same. Like, sprinting's not the same as anything else. I'm not aware of any trainer at the moment that's happy to put their neck in line and say what their fundamental belief system is. That is mine, and I'm not worried about. I'm quite confident that is the facts. So no one can argue that. No one can say that sprinting is equal to other types of exercise as long as calories are matched. It's not. It's just not. So this is why you need to consider the sprint drills. Okay, the sprint drills aren't a warm up. The sprint drills are the magic that allows you to then become a better sprinter, which then allows you to utilise more muscle and recruit more muscle fibre. So if you're not sure about why we're doing the sprints or what the purpose of the sprint drills are, is to facilitate the energy system that we're wanting to tap into more, which is the creatine phosphate system, because the metabolic effect that creates through the huge explosion of energy that's required to perform the movements within that system is enormous. Let me know if this makes sense, okay? I'm not saying we're all going to be Usain Bolts. We're not. That's not the point, though. Like, people put a ceiling on what they can achieve, so they'll just go to the gym and they'll go on the treadmill for half an hour or 45 minutes and they'll leave and they've burned 500 calories off. Everyone has got the ability to become faster, stronger and more powerful. Everyone. It doesn't matter about your age, and it doesn't matter about where your current fitness levels are, because you're only focusing on improving yourself. So don't pretend that because you're not that good at sprinting that means you can't do it. You can get better at it. Everyone can get better at it, and the physiological effects on becoming more athletic and aesthetic effects of becoming more athletic are enormous, and they'll carry into the decades of your lives, right? So I really feel so strongly about this. This video is definitely not long enough to explain energy systems. That's 14:55. Right, anyway, see, hope that helped a wee tiny bit. I'll go in and